reporter for the highest circulation paper in northern New Jersey, who happened to be a classmate of my roommate at Dartmouth College years ago. So I had a contact there. The fellow opened up. He did a whole series of stories, and he said, I don't know this thing, but Howard is truthful. He's telling it as it is. The story never changes. It's the same way. And in that town of Washington, New Jersey, I interviewed this high school principal. At that time, I interviewed a blind lady, but a very fine woman of some note locally. And she told me quite a story with another teacher and a physician. Oh gosh, you name it. Another fellow lived in the south part where they have all the hunting, and he kept on the moon potatoes that Howard had, so-called, the specimen he picked up wherever he was, out in space, who knows. But these people swore by him. They told some extraordinary stories.
What did those eyewitnesses see? What did they describe?
Well, I remember once, of course, the craft or whatever they are, the lights in the sky and the landings in the field, the great sociological, psychosocial significance of thousands of people present. And again, through synchronicity or luck, I had this patient whose father happened to be in the state police of New Jersey, so they wouldn't, as a physician, they're usually most courteous to me, occupationally perhaps. I went in and they opened the door and they said, we cannot explain this, we do not understand it, but yes, this is on the level, these strange things happen. And matter of fact, you couldn't shut them up, they had to go on and on. So, quite a story.
There were people that said they saw lights in the sky and things that darted very fast that didn't look like a helicopter or a plane because it moved too swiftly. And I remember we all came down to look at the field where the flying saucer had landed, where he said it had landed. And it was round, like burnt mark on the ground where the grass had all been singed.
And in the 1950s, a young high school boy came to me and said this man was taking him up in the wood and showing them lights that glowed. And he told them the lights came from flying saucers, from men who were landing regularly in a place called High Bridge, New Jersey. It's about 10 miles from here, from Washington, where we are now. And I knew this young boy, and I prevailed upon him to tell me more about it. I was interested as a newspaper man, and he told me who the man was, and it was Howard Menger. At that time, Howard Menger was a sign painter in a sign painting shop just about 2 blocks from this house, up around the corner. And I knew Howard, knew his wife, knew his children, knew his family, and as a reporter, I thought, I have to find out more about this. So I got a hold of a couple of friends of mine from the state police, and we went to visit Howard, and he said, oh yeah, they're up there, and he showed us some photographs he had made of flying saucers, and he asked us if we would like to meet these people from outer space, and of course we said yes. So he took us up to a field up on top of the mountain and said they'd be there at about 11 o'clock at night, and we just had to wait. And needless to say, we waited and waited, and nobody ever showed up. Howard later told me, he said, one of those guys that was with you was carrying a gun. I said, Howard, all those guys were carrying guns. They're all state policemen.
Well, one evening, he advised me that there would be a sighting, he believed, so I took a girl I was dating at the time, whose name was Dorothy, and a friend who worked for my father. His name was Richard Barry, and he was repairing televisions for my father. He was a student, I think, of Princeton at the time. I couldn't drive, I didn't have a license at the time. So Richard drove Dorothy and myself down there, and we met at Howard's house, sat in his kitchen, had cocoa, as I recall, and he said, let's go up into the woods and we'll see if, he said, I think the ships are here. So we did. And it was Howard, his wife Rose, his sister-in-law Mary, who I think was single at the time, myself, Dorothy, and Mr. Barry. So, and we broke up into groups. Howard and two of the women went one way, and myself and Mr. Barry and Dorothy went another way. And we walked down this wood trail, and we did see these pulsating lights in a ravine on the ground, and these were believed to be he said they were scout ships. And they seemed to be translucent, like you could see through them, and they seemed to have brighter cores inside, like a light bulb would do, or a vacuum tube would do. And they would change colors. They'd be pink, and then they'd be green, and then they'd be white, and whatever. And they just kind of seemed to hover over the ground. One of them did seem to put out a little light, which kind of went round us, I think, and then went back in again. And we were awestruck. There's no doubt about that. I remember I'm 16 years old and never saw anything like this in my life, and quite believed everything that we saw was, in fact, out of this world. So we went back down to his house, and he said, I think one of the alien people trust this group, and they're going to make themselves visible. So we went out and stood in his backyard in a lawn area, and it goes up to a hillside. It was in meadows. And within a short period of time, Howard says, look, here comes one now. And there was this kind of ghosty apparition of a human figure, which kind of floated across the meadow. I remember he kind of went over a fence, kind of just floated over a barbed wire fence, and came near to us, but not that near that you could distinguish any features. I'm talking maybe several hundred feet. And then he faded away back into the woodland. And that was it. And we went back to the house, and we were just like, whoa. Greatest thing that ever was.
Another incident I recall vividly, Augie Roberts, the photographer who was documented so much of this from the early days forward, was once at Howard's house, where Howard was, just after a whole series of exciting events out in the field with the craft landing, whatever the thing was. And Howard was alone in the house. Augie knew that. And yet Howard was carrying on a conversation with another voice. Now, unless Howard is the world's greatest ventriloquist, which to my knowledge he isn't, Augie said, what is going on here?
One of the curious who wanted to see firsthand what was behind Menger's contacts was the young journalist, Constance Michels. She was so fascinated by the young contactee that she fell in love and married Howard Menger in 1958. Shortly after that, she had her own first UFO encounter.
I have never seen a landed disc, but one evening shortly after we were married, we were coming home from grocery shopping, and as we came up on the hill on the farm, we parked the car against the fence, and there was a big luminous pearl-like spherical shape right above the trees over the next field. And Howard stopped. He said, look. And I said, oh, wait, I've got to get my camera. And by the time I got to the station wagon, turn around and get the camera, it was gone. That was one of the times. When we were on our honeymoon in Las Vegas, we saw the same pearl-like iridescent globular disc. And one more time, which this really gets me, but it was it was on our farm, and we were there. Our attorney was with us, and we had heard that some people at White House, they were having a game, and they had seen discs flying over the stadium. So we went out in the field and looked upward, and sure enough, there was a fleet of discs flying overhead. And our attorney turned to me and said, Connie, this is for you. And one of the discs dipped, just like that. And that was that day, or that week, I became cognizant of the fact that I was pregnant. I was with child, our first child.
Howard Menger is a truthful person who's had some extraordinary experiences, and as I think he says himself, he cannot explain them, he doesn't understand them.